Chinese President Xi Jinping and DPRK leader Kim Jong Un just had their second meeting in less than 2 months. What's behind this surprise meeting and what did the two leaders discuss? Emmanuel Macron is starting his second year as France's president this week. What stands out from his first year on the job and what hurdles are ahead? And fashion faux pas or cultural appreciation? I'll be talking to the US teen whose Chinese-style prom dress launched more than 1,000 tweets and triggered an international debate. Welcome to The Point. Live from Beijing, I'm Liu Xin. Chinese President Xi Jinping met with DPRK leader Kim Jong Un in Dalian, northeast China's Liaoning province, from May the 7th to the 8th. Xi Jinping spoke highly of Kim revisiting China after just 40 days, adding that Kim's trips to China show the great attachment between the two countries. The meeting also showed the importance of their strategic communication, especially at a critical moment on the Korean Peninsula. Since Xi's first meeting with Kim, bilateral ties and Korean Peninsula tensions have made positive progress. She also said he is looking forward to the next meeting with Kim to further promote a healthy and stable development of China-DPRK relations and long-term peace, stability and prosperity in the region. Joining me for tonight's discussion on this topic in Beijing is Professor Cui Hongjian, Director of the European Department at the China Institute of International Studies. Professor Cui, welcome to the studio. What is the significance of this second meeting between these two leaders in just over 40 days?
Yes, as we know, a very frequent meeting between two leaders. I think it showcased closer and closer, communication between two countries since the last meeting. And also, I think that we can find that a very interesting place for the meeting, Dalian. As we know, Dalian is very near to DPRK. And as we know, after the first meeting with Mr. Xi, President Kim announced a kind of opening up the reform policy of DPRK.
Right.
So actually, once there will be some direct development for economy for DPRK, undoubtedly the Dalian and some other northeast part of China will become a very, very important partners to North Korea. Yeah.
Right. So, but timing-wise, right, this meeting comes on the heels of the very historic summit between the two Koreas, which just happened at the end about 10 days ago. So, what is the purpose of his visit this time here in China? Yeah,
I think that since the first meeting between two leaders, we find out the process of the Korea Peninsula now is going to a very benign direction. I think that now it's a very, very critical time for all of the stakeholders and all of the players to get some joint effort. So I think, as we know, after this meeting, there will be some other meetings, the meeting between the leaders from two Koreas, and also there will be a meeting between Mr. Kim and Donald Trump.
Right.
So I think for China and North Korea, DPRK, both countries need to find out more joint stance and to have some more coordination.
Do we know whose idea it was to visit China? Was it China's invitation, or did Mr. Kim invite himself?
Oh yes, it's more technical issues. But
Do we know?
Yes, but I think that from both two sides, China and the DPRK, we do have the same willing to get a closer communication. But at this moment, I think mostly DPRK showed a more active attitude, try to resolve some more problem. So I think at this moment, DPRK showed more active.
And China,
willing.
Of course, is
yes,
more than willing to.
Because we are in the same interests.
Right. Yeah. Now, US President Donald Trump actually just moments ago sent out a tweet where he said he would speak to his friend President Xi. He said that the primary topics will be trade, where good things will happen, and North Korea, where relationships and trust are building. And we also know that the two leaders are expected to have a phone call in a matter of hours. So what is going on here? Why all of a sudden, everything is really in a flurry?
Yes, also, for this Korea Peninsula issue, there are some very important stakeholders, including China. But China, I think, is a very special stakeholder in this on this issue. China is an indispensable one. But of course, so far we have to say that the United States and President Trump still the biggest uncertainties for any kind of, progress for this peninsula issue. So I think that once there is a meeting happened between Mr. Kim and Donald Trump, before that, I think China and DPRK, we should have some more communication. And also the meeting between Mr. Xi and his counterpart in DPRK also showed a very, very strong message to United States. Because also, among all of the efforts by China, one of the very important proposal by China is China support any kind of justified security concern from DPRK. I think we can find out point out that the United States should do everything to help this positive process, not to do something against it.
Mm-hmm. And I think also a very important message reiterated here, right, that China supports the insistence of the DPRK to go towards denuclearization. I think that message is necessary to be reiterated. And the DPRK also says so long as the threats or the hostile policy against the DPRK is listed, it is realistic for the DPRK to denuclearize. So again, some very important messages reiterated, but we're going to talk about that subject when we have more information. Now let's take a short break and we'll be going to our next subject, which is French President Emmanuel Macron's first year in office. Stay right here. So French President Emmanuel Macron marked his first year in office this week, winning on a centrist platform that promised to reboot the country's economy. France's youngest leader in modern history has been shaking up French institutions, introducing sweeping reforms and amplifying France's voice on the international stage. But with anti-Macron protests erupting in Paris last week and approval ratings dropping, tough tests loom both at home and abroad. So despite a cozy relationship with the US President Donald Trump, how much sway has Macron had on issues such as the Iran nuclear deal and Paris Climate Accord? Are Macron's grand ambitions for France sustainable or starting to lose momentum? Joining me for this discussion is still Professor Cui Hongjian, and we are joined in Paris by Professor Joab Toka from the American Graduate School in Paris. Welcome, Professor Toka, to join us. Now, let me come to Professor Toka in Paris first. How would you evaluate Mr. Macron's first year in office? A success, a failure, or something in developing story?
No, I would rather clearly say it is a success. Now, it's a debatable success to some of the French voters, some of the French electorate. Of course, the president and the president policies are controversial. They have always been, and they are in a way even more controversial perhaps today than a year ago when he was elected. But one cannot ignore the fact that in terms of the French economy, in terms of the integration of French economy in the larger European framework of economies and policies, and perhaps even more significantly so over the international landscape and international politics, this first year is a clear success.
Now, however, in April, polls show that Macron's domestic approval ratings are around 40%. Of course, that's higher than his predecessor, François Hollande and Nicolas Sarkozy, at about the same moment in their office, but also much lower than his high of 62% right after he won the election last May. Professor Cui, does that indicate the confidence of the general public in Macron dropping, if any, and what key factors could account for this drop in popularity?
Yes, I think to a large degree, yes. Just like a French scholar mentioned, that Now, 1 year after he took the position as president, now the reform launched by the new president, a young president, now is going to the, we call the deep water area. So now it has to touch some more interests from some, especially some sectors, some average people, just as what happened now, the strike organized by unions. But of course, I think at the same time, another reason for a drop of popularity of the young president is, also, you know, once he elected, there was a high expectation from almost all of the classes of French people. But 1 year after, I think people will find more mistakes or some more flaws from this new president. So I think, yes, maybe it's a very natural process for you know, French politics.
Right. Well, in his first year in office, Macron scrapped the wealth tax to promote business-friendly policies, weakened conditions for layoffs, and is now trying to modernize the state-owned SNCF railway and amend rail workers' special status. So, Professor Toker, are Macron's reforms working and revitalizing France's economy?
We do not yet whether they are working on the long run, of course, because we're speaking about very recent ones. The overall indications over the stable of the economy are rather positive, almost over any, in terms of any criteria, employment, growth, sense of confidence, investment, etc. But they are modestly so. We're not seeing something which is really sweeping. For example, the way those parallel indications are for the US economy since the arrival of President Trump in the White House about a year ago, over a year ago now. So this also makes us perhaps better understand what we were saying up to now in the conversation, and what my distinguished colleague in the studio in Beijing just explained. Schematically, we have right now in France 3/3 of large blocks. 1/3 are those who believed in Macron all from the very beginning, voted for him, and they still believe in him. Mm-hmm. Indeed, they are even more enthusiastic about it. There's a 2/3 of those who were against Macron, voted against Macron for very different reasons. They are still against Macron, and perhaps even more vehemently so. And then there is that third of sort of moving sands, moving waters, if you wish, of people who do not feel comfortable with what Macron is doing, who rather feel comfortable with his personality and his way of exercising the presidency, and still give him the credit of some time, as he's young, as he's new into politics. Let's give him a chance. And this is the French landscape right now.
Okay. Professor Cui, you wrote in a recent article, you said France's main problem is faced with the risks of reform. Its economic strength does not match its great ambition of being the leader of Europe. The results of Macron's reform are still unknown in the short term, and his suggestion to carry reform into other areas has faced objections from French society. So how and when will we know if the results of Macron's reforms are working?
Yes, also, you know, at the beginning, it looks like President Macron tried to find out a mixture of the economic and the social policy to be satisfied with everybody, from left, from right. But once there are some more reform happened, especially when it touched some real interests of some sectors of some average people, maybe the risk for the reform is it will be unsatisfied with everybody. So now we can find more and more critics from not only left and also from right. And of course, at the same time, for President Macron, another risk is he wants to do everything at one time. So because also, you know, he needed to get some more support, or kind of a stronger support from average people, because there will be a European Parliament election next year, and a local election in France in the year of 2020. So I think now the problem for Mr. Macron and also the average people is both of them are not patient for any kind of reform, especially some reform needed to get some more time to understand what's the real outcomes.
Let's talk a little bit about the international relations of France. Now, Macron just made a 3-day visit to the United States where he told the US to withdraw from the Iran nuclear deal would mean to open the Pandora's box. It would mean war, and in a matter of hours again, President Trump has posted that he will review his decision. So, Professor Toker, how much influence do you think Mr. Macron might have already had on President Trump? And I know it's very difficult to predict the future, especially when this show is rebroadcast. The decision is probably out. But do you think Mr. Macron was successful at all in trying to, change Mr. Trump's mind a little bit?
Indeed, it's a risky question, or rather risky answer, as President Trump, I believe, is about to announce his decision regarding the Iranian deal in about 4 hours from now, when we are live on the air. Most American commentators believe that he will withdraw one way or the other from the deal, although not everybody is sure as whether it's going to be sort of 100% withdrawal or a more nuanced one, which indeed was what Mr. Macron had advocated as he was talking to Mr. Trump about 2 weeks ago.
Right.
As a matter of fact, he went even further. French President Macron went even further and not only criticized diplomatically, of course, the supposed intention of Mr. Trump to withdraw from the deal,
right,
but actually suggested sort of a new solution, sort of a supplementary volet to this politics. So even if America does take distance from the deal it had itself signed 3 years ago, then it won't be sort of jump into the unknown and something will replace the Iranian deal, which is very important for the sake of the stability in the Middle East and elsewhere.
We have to leave it there. Thank you so much. Thank you very much to my two guests, Professor Cui Hongjie, Director of the European Department at the China Institute of International Studies, and Professor Joab Toker from the American Graduate School in Paris. And you have been watching The Point with me, Liu Xin. We'll take a short break and we'll be back right after this.
This is CGTN.
You're watching CGTN. I'm Jeff Moody, live in Beijing.
You're watching CGTN.
Coming to you from Washington, D.C.
You're watching CGTN.
Coming to you from my room.
I'm members of
Mark, what can you tell us about events happening there?
politics.
This is a pretty picture. I think of the event.
Back over to Beijing.
To go after them.
All about the
This is CGTN. CGTN. See the difference.
Keziah Daum, an 18-year-old from the U.S. state of Utah, sparked an international debate on cultural appropriation by wearing a traditional Chinese dress called a qipao to her high school prom last month. Keziah, who has no Chinese roots, posted a photo of herself in the red dress on social media and rapidly became the target of fierce criticism. Her single tweet has attracted more than 110,000 likes and increased her follower numbers from the hundreds to more than 33,000. So why did a prom dress trigger this wave of internet buzz? How is the online Chinese community reacting, and how to balance the so-called cultural appropriation and cultural appreciation? I'm pleased to be joined by Keziah Daum herself in Salt Lake City, Utah, to share her personal thoughts. And also in the studio, I'm joined by Han Hua Fellow of Chongyang Research Institute of Renmin University of China. So welcome, ladies, and you both look very nice. Let me go to Keziah first, however. Tell us the story behind your choice. Why did you choose to wear a Chinese qipao to your high school prom?
I had chosen this dress because I was absolutely blown away with how gorgeous it was and the modesty and the neckline, and I thought it was very unique, and I love the way it looked. I love the way it looked.
Yeah. Well, what did the internet trolls say about your dress on both sides, those who support you and those who criticize you?
Those people who were criticizing me tended to accuse me of racism and cultural appropriation, but those who were on my side were telling me that I had nothing to worry about, and that I was being brave, and that I should keep embracing the beauty of other cultures.
Yeah. Did you understand at all when you get this kind of criticism or comments? Were you surprised? Did you understand what cultural appropriation really meant?
I was surprised at first with the negative reactions I was getting, because my intent was to show my appreciation for the Chinese culture. And I had heard the term cultural appropriation before, although I had no idea that it would be thought of as something that I was doing.
Yeah. So were you annoyed? Were you disturbed by these criticism? How did you react to the situation?
I reacted in multiple different ways. At first I was a little confused and sad, but I began to gain some confidence in knowing that what I did was something I did in the right intent.
Well, there were some comments, for instance, this one that stood out by someone called Jeremy Lam, who retweeted it and said that my culture, obviously he's from Asian descent, he said, my culture is not your prom dress. I'm not going to repeat those words. So why do you think your picture would trigger this kind of reaction in the Chinese community? Can you understand the situation?
I do understand why some people may be offended, but I don't think they fully understand the reason behind why I wore the dress and my intention towards it. And I do understand why people may be confused, but I think it's because they don't fully understand and know what my original intention was.
Yeah, let me come to Han Hua here in the studio a little bit. So when you heard this story, what was your first impression? Were you surprised that people would be criticized for posing and wearing a Chinese qipao?
Well, I'm wearing qipao today to show my support.
It's a beautiful one, by the way.
Thank you very much. And I think it was a little bit bizarre to me that this kind of wearing such a beautiful qipao can be can be triggered and can be a viral event on the internet, especially in the United States. I think what a prom means to a teenager, especially a teenager girl, in the United States, it's more like the most significant event in their, in their coming of age. So this is like a quite pretty signal to show their cultural appreciation towards qipao, and it is such a beautiful effect to be worn on a Keziah, such a beautiful girl. So I think maybe probably because it's such a beautiful girl and hot topic like a Chinese culture, and the netizens, they are easily getting offended. Some factors getting together to make it a hot event.
Do you, what is the cultural appropriation? Do you think it applies here? Do you think we really need to make a distinction between what is my culture and what is your culture?
Of course not. I think it's an evolving process, and cultural appropriation in its original format, in the first place, was a sociology term that defines that a kind of culture theft or a culture borrowing without the permission of especially the minority cultures in their element, and a kind of use with the kind of malice or bad intentions. But it does not apply to this case at all, because it's more like a culture appreciation of the other party's culture, even though Keziah herself in the first place does not know qipao means to Chinese culture, to Chinese women, but I think her decision is very beautiful.
But how would you explain the fact that so much attention, right, so much buzz has gone to this one subject, thousands, hundreds of thousands of thumbs up or retweets? What is driving such craze?
To netizens, I think probably, in my personal opinion, probably because it's in the wake of this political climate in the United States now. Something, especially the culture things, are tearing these nations apart. Unfortunately, I have to say so, because of this Trump administration, because of his determination to build a war between U.S. and between Mexico, and other events happened in this culture context. So, and plus the netizens, especially the young netizens, are kind of easily to be offended, because the internet is such a free world to show your personal feelings, not privately but publicly, very easily. So these factors combined together make it a viral event.
Yeah. Keziah, have you thought about it? Why you got so many thumbs up, so many retweets, so many comments? Did you ever figure out what was behind this?
I feel that there were people who fully understood some of the reasons why I wore the dress and how I truly appreciated the beauty of this culture, and that I'm sure these people were somewhat proud and admired the fact that I would be willing to wear one of their dresses to something as important to a teenager as prom.
Yes.
So in the future, will you wear a qipao to another occasion again, or will you be emboldened by this whole event?
I would definitely wear a dress like that again. I absolutely love it, and it's gorgeous.
Thank you, thank you. We have to leave it there. By the way, those pictures, you did look great in the Chinese qipao, so bravo. And many thanks to my two guests here for this discussion, Keziah Daum in Salt Lake City, Utah, and Han Hua, Fellow of Chongyang Research Institute of Renmin University of China. A quick point, actually, I'm a fan of qipao as well, and I really don't have a problem with anybody who feels good about wearing a qipao and posing in it and posting it on the internet. Basically, if people feel good about wearing anything and want to pose in it, it is their freedom, so long as they're not degrading someone else's culture and disrespecting someone or group of people because of that attire. Why is wearing a nice, inoffensive dress arousing so much controversy? I think the qipao came from China but really belongs to the world. Everybody can wear it. There is no, this is my qipao, not yours. So if you want to wear qipao, go ahead and put on one with pride. That is all for this edition of The Point with me, Li Xin. As always, follow me on Facebook and Twitter using the handle The Point with Alex. Download the application called CGTN to watch the show on your mobile devices, or go to YouTube and look for CGTN The Point. Thanks for watching. You've got The Point. Wear qipao next time.